Put your hands where I can see them. Don't move or I'll put you on the ground right now. Officer James Tucker's voice exploded across Freedom Park like a thunderclap, sending nearby families into stunned silence. Phones came up instantly, recording what was about to unfold. If you're watching this right now, pause for a second. Tell me where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button, and give this video a like so more people can hear Lauren's story. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. It was a warm August afternoon at Freedom Park in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Lauren Harris, a 40-year-old single mother and seasoned FBI special agent, sat beneath the shade of an old oak tree, watching her two sons, Henry and Ethan, kick a worn soccer ball across the grass. Henry, at 13, had his father's sharp features and carried his favorite camera around his neck, snapping photos between passes. 9-year-old Ethan, his boundless energy a constant source of laughter, sprinted after every kick like he was chasing his dreams. For Lauren, these moments were rare, a chance to exhale after endless weeks buried in high-profile FBI cases. But even in this peace, her instincts never fully rested. Years of training had taught her to notice the small things, the unfamiliar faces, the lingering stares, the shifting tones in a crowd. It started subtly. A white couple on a nearby bench, whispering behind dark sunglasses, glancing repeatedly at Lauren and her boys. At first, she brushed it off. Being a black woman raising 2 black sons in America had taught her to ignore suspicious eyes. But then the woman's voice cut through the breeze, sharp and judgmental. "Those kids don't even look like hers. Are you sure they're safe?" Henry froze mid-pass, hearing it too. His shoulders slumped, and he looked toward his mother with wide, confused eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "why is she saying that?" Lauren knelt in front of him, placing a calming hand on his arm. "Ignore them, baby," she said softly, forcing a smile. "We're here to have fun." Ethan tugged at her sleeve, unaware of the tension building around them. "Mom, let's do penalty kicks," he grinned, oblivious to the woman who now had her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in low but urgent tones. A knot formed in Lauren's stomach as her senses sharpened. Years of undercover work had honed her ability to read intent, and this woman wasn't just gossiping, she was making a report. Moments later, the crunch of tires on gravel stole Lauren's attention. A police cruiser rolled into the park, its reflection glinting off the sunlit lake. Lauren's heart sank as she instinctively pulled her sons close. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their postures rigid, hands hovering near their belts. Officer James Tucker led the way, tall and imposing, his jaw set in a hard line. Behind him followed Officer Kevin Walsh, younger but equally tense. "Afternoon, ma'am," Tucker said flatly, scanning Lauren from head to toe like she was already guilty. "We got a call about suspicious activity. Mind answering a few questions?" Lauren straightened her back, her voice calm but clipped. "We're just playing soccer. Officer, no trouble here." Tucker's expression didn't soften. "Report says there's a woman here with 2 kids who might not be hers. I'm gonna need to see some ID." His words hung in the air like a slap. Henry's small hand tightened around hers, and Ethan's grin faded into confusion. Lauren drew in a slow breath, schooling her features into neutrality even as anger simmered beneath the surface. "Officer," she said evenly, "these are my sons. We came here to enjoy the park like everyone else." But Tucker's stance shifted, his thumb grazing the edge of his holster, his body radiating challenge. "ID," he repeated sharply. The park had gone quiet, the cheerful sounds of children and joggers replaced by the low hum of phone cameras clicking on. A small crowd began gathering, their murmurs filling the silence as the tension thickened like storm clouds before lightning strikes. Lauren reached slowly into her purse, narrating her every movement for clarity. "I'm going to get my wallet," she said calmly, maintaining steady eye contact with Tucker. Before her fingers touched the leather strap, he stepped forward abruptly, grabbing her wrist with a grip that sent pain shooting up her arm. "Don't try anything," he barked, his voice laced with authority and suspicion. Henry gasped, his young voice trembling. "Mom!" Ethan instinctively backed up, clutching his brother's sleeve. In that split second, Lauren's FBI training took over. Her vision narrowed, her body shifting into controlled precision. She twisted her wrist sharply, breaking free of Tucker's grip with practiced efficiency, then stepped back to shield her sons behind her. "Do not touch me," she warned, her voice low and edged with steel. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones now raised higher as someone whispered, "She knows what she's doing." Tucker's face darkened, his ego bruised in front of witnesses. "Ma'am," he said with mock politeness, "comply, or we'll handle this another way." His hand hovered dangerously close to his taser. Walsh moved subtly to the side, cutting off Lauren's escape path, his eyes scanning the boys like they were potential threats. Lauren planted herself firmly between her children and the officers, her heartbeat pounding like a war drum in her ears. "My sons are not in danger," she said, each word deliberate, carrying the weight of 15 years of federal authority behind it. "And neither am I. We are leaving now." Tucker smirked, tilting his head. "Not without ID. You're not—" The standoff stretched into silence, broken only by the distant laughter of children playing on the other side of the park, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing nearby. More phones came up. "Somebody go live!" a voice whispered from the crowd. Lauren could feel the weight of 100 eyes on her, the simmering tension ready to ignite at the smallest spark. And then, the spark came. Tucker stepped closer, his voice dropping low enough for only her to hear. "People like you should know better than to make scenes," he muttered darkly, his words dripping with venom. Lauren's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Her silence was power, her control absolute. Henry's voice, soft and shaky, broke the moment. "Mom, are we in trouble?" She looked down at her son, brushing a trembling hand across his cheek, and smiled faintly. "No, baby," she whispered. "We're going to be fine." But inside, Lauren knew this was far from over. Her instinct screamed that this was only the beginning, that something much bigger, much darker, was at play here, as the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the park. Lauren prepared herself, if they thought she was just another scared single mom. They were about to find out how wrong they were. She had spent 15 years defending justice. Today, she would defend her family. And this was only part one of the fight to come. Officer James Tucker's hand hovered over his holster, his cold stare fixed on Lauren as if daring her to resist. The air around them felt electrified, every second stretching longer than the last. "I said ID, now!" Tucker barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the hushed silence of Freedom Park. Children stopped playing. Parents clutched their kids closer. Dozens of phones stayed raised high, recording every moment. Henry's small hand trembled in Lauren's, his 13-year-old voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, what's happening?" Lauren's jaw tightened, her breathing steady despite the firestorm inside her chest. "It's okay, baby," she said softly, forcing calm into her tone while her FBI-trained instincts calculated every detail, the angle of Tucker's stance, Officer Kevin Walsh circling left to block her path, the growing crowd behind her sons. This was escalating, and she knew it. Slowly. She reached for her purse, narrating each movement like she'd done 100 times in hostile situations. "I'm going to retrieve my wallet," she said, her tone controlled, but before she could even touch the zipper. Tucker lunged forward, gripping her wrist so hard she winced. "I told you not to move!" he snapped, his fingers digging into her skin. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Ethan cried out, clutching Henry's arm. Lauren's training kicked in instantly, in one fluid motion. She twisted her wrist sharply, using Tucker's own weight against him, breaking free from his hold without hesitation. "Do not put your hands on me," she said, her voice low, steady, and commanding. The kind of tone that made hardened criminals pause. Tucker's expression flickered. Shock, then rage. "Resisting an officer," he growled, stepping closer, his hand now fully gripping his taser. Walsh took his cue, lunging toward her, but Lauren sidestepped, redirecting his momentum. The younger officer stumbled, barely catching himself before falling into the grass. "Back up!" Lauren's voice thundered across the park as she placed herself between the officers and her sons. Her stance defensive but unwavering. Phones captured every second, murmurs rippling through the growing crowd. "She knows what she's doing. That's FBI training. This is gonna blow up online." Ethan's voice cracked through the chaos. "Mom, please stop." Lauren glanced back, softening her tone. "It's okay. Baby, stay behind me." But her attention snapped back to Tucker, whose face was red with frustration, his pride wounded in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Last warning, ma'am," he barked, raising his taser. "Comply, or we'll put you down." That was it, in one seamless motion. Lauren reached into her blazer pocket, pulling out her gold FBI badge and holding it high for everyone to see. The emblem caught the sunlight, gleaming like a shield of authority. "I am Dr. Lauren Harris, Special Agent, FBI," she declared, her voice cutting through the heavy air like a blade. "You are assaulting a federal officer, and you will step back, now." The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers, the tension boiling over. Tucker froze mid-step, his taser still aimed at her chest, his arrogance faltering as reality began to sink in. Walsh blinked, his posture shifting uneasily, but Tucker recovered quickly, his jaw clenching as he sneered. "Badge or not," he spat, "you're causing a disturbance." Lauren held her ground, her badge steady in her grip. "No, Officer Tucker, you are, and every camera here is capturing it." She gestured subtly toward the dozens of onlookers recording, their phones broadcasting the confrontation live on social media. But Tucker wasn't done. He took a step forward, trying to assert dominance, when suddenly the wail of sirens split the tension. Two more cruisers screeched into the parking lot, tires crunching over gravel. 4 additional officers spilled out, their weapons already drawn. Behind them came a tall, stocky man in a white-collared shirt and dark tie, Captain David Morrow, head of the Charlotte Police Department's Patrol Division. His expression was unreadable as he scanned the scene, but his cold, calculating eyes locked onto Lauren like a predator sizing up prey. "Agent Harris," he said finally, his tone low but cutting. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" Lauren kept her voice calm, projecting authority. "Enjoying an afternoon at the park with my children until your officers assaulted me without cause." Morrow raised an eyebrow, then looked at Tucker. "Is that true?" Tucker scoffed. "She resisted. She refused to show ID. We had reason to believe those kids weren't hers." Lauren's gaze hardened, her voice sharp enough to command silence. "You had no reason, and now you're on record harassing a federal agent in front of her children." Morrow smirked faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Videos don't show intent. Agent Harris, all I see is an escalation you caused." Henry tugged on Ethan's sleeve, whispering, "Why are they lying?" Lauren crouched just enough to meet her son's frightened eyes, brushing her hand gently across Ethan's tear-streaked cheek. "You're safe," she whispered, steady and certain, though inside she was boiling. Then she rose again, taller than before, her voice ringing out so every phone nearby would capture it. "Captain Morrow, you're going to release my family, now, and when we leave this park, I will be filing an official complaint against your officers for unlawful harassment." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. The cameras zoomed in closer. Morrow's jaw tightened, but instead of backing down, he waved to one of the arriving officers. "Agent Harris, I'm placing you in protective detention until we sort this out." That single phrase shifted the atmosphere instantly. Henry grabbed Ethan's hand tighter. "Protective detention? What's that mean?" he whispered, panic creeping into his voice. Lauren turned to her boys, kneeling low, cupping their faces gently. "Listen to me," she said softly. "You're going to go with Ms. Thompson over there." She pointed to a nearby woman from the crowd who had stepped forward protectively. "I'll be fine. I promise." But as she stood, placing herself in full view, she knew this wasn't about safety. It was intimidation, plain and simple. Two officers moved toward her, hands ready on their cuffs, but Lauren raised her badge higher. "You lay one finger on me," she said firmly, "and I will have the DOJ on this department before sunrise." A hush fell. Even Morrow hesitated, but then he gestured curtly, and Tucker stepped forward anyway, lips curled in a bitter smile. "You think that badge protects you?" he sneered. Lauren didn't flinch, her voice steady but low enough for only him to hear. "That badge isn't what protects me. My training does. Try me." Around them, the crowd began chanting, "Let her go! Let her go!" The voices grew louder, dozens turning into hundreds, and phones streamed it all live. Morrow's face darkened as he realized control of the narrative was slipping, but still, he doubled down, waving the officers forward again. "Escort her to the cruiser," he ordered, and as they surrounded her. Lauren glanced back at Henry and Ethan, their small figures holding tightly to each other, terror written across their faces. She forced a reassuring smile she didn't feel, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around her. "Stay together, boys. I'll see you soon." As they walked her toward the cruiser, the chants grew louder, the cameras closer, and the world beyond Freedom Park began to take notice. And in that moment, Lauren knew this was bigger than her, bigger than one confrontation, bigger than one badge. They had just declared war on the wrong woman. This was no longer about an afternoon in the park. This was the beginning of a battle that would shake the entire city. The ride from Freedom Park to the precinct was silent, but the weight pressing down on Lauren's chest felt crushing. Henry and Ethan weren't with her. Ms. Thompson, the kind woman from the crowd, had taken them home. That was her only comfort. Inside the cruiser, she sat straight-backed, wrists free but dignity bruised, every second replaying Tucker's grip on her arm and the fear in her son's eyes. By the time they pulled into the Charlotte Police Department, the sun was dipping low, throwing long shadows across the concrete lot. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled of sweat, stale coffee, and tension. They put her in a small interrogation room, a metal table, 2 chairs, a single camera mounted high in the corner. Captain David Morrow entered with a file under his arm, his expression stone cold, followed by Officer Tucker and a silent internal affairs observer. Lauren leaned back in her chair, calm on the outside but every sense heightened. "Agent Harris," Morrow began, his tone clipped. "You assaulted 2 officers in a public park." Lauren locked her gaze on him, unwavering. "I defended myself and my children against unlawful force, and unless you've forgotten, I am a federal agent with full authority to carry out my duties." Tucker scoffed, crossing his arms, a bruise forming along his wrist where she'd broken his grip. "Your badge doesn't give you the right to resist lawful orders," he said, his voice sharp, pride wounded. Lauren leaned forward, voice measured but laced with steel. "Your orders weren't lawful. Officer Tucker, and the dozens of videos circulating online right now prove it." The internal affairs observer shifted uncomfortably, but Morrow didn't flinch. "Videos don't show intent," he repeated, his favorite line. though his eyes flickered with something close to unease. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going home tonight, Agent Harris. But this isn't over. There will be an internal review of your conduct." Lauren's jaw clenched. "I'll expect the same for your officers," she replied calmly, standing up before he could dismiss her, but Morrow's smirk returned, thin and deliberate. "We'll see what the Bureau says about this," he said, tapping the file on the table before leaving. Hours later. Lauren drove home through Charlotte's quiet Myers Park neighborhood. The night air was thick with humidity, her headlights cutting through tree-lined streets. Henry and Ethan were already asleep at Ms. Thompson's, and she planned to pick them up after she showered and regrouped. Pulling into her driveway, she killed the engine and sat for a moment, gathering herself, but a sharp glint in her rearview mirror caught her attention. A dark sedan, parked across the street, lights off, engine idling. Her instincts screamed. She pretended not to notice, stepping out calmly, locking her SUV as if nothing was wrong. She had taken 2 steps toward her front door when she heard it, the low crunch of gravel behind her, spinning. She saw 3 masked men emerging from the shadows, dressed in black tactical gear, moving like trained operatives. Her pulse spiked, but fear never reached her eyes. "FBI, stand down!" she barked, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. They didn't hesitate. The first lunged forward with a baton, swinging for her ribs. She sidestepped and slammed the car door into his chest, the impact knocking him back with a grunt. The second man grabbed for her throat, but Lauren twisted his arm, using his own momentum to send him stumbling forward, smashing into her mailbox. The third attacker swung a punch that clipped her jaw, pain exploding across her face, but she recovered instantly, driving her knee into his stomach with brutal precision. "Stay down!" she shouted, drawing on every ounce of her FBI training. She was holding her ground, until the second man recovered, tackling her from behind, slamming her shoulder against the driveway. The rough pavement tore at her skin, but adrenaline kept her moving. She slammed her elbow backward, connecting with his nose, the crack sharp and satisfying. He howled, staggering away, blood streaming beneath his mask. The third came at her again, swinging his baton downward, but she caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting hard until he dropped the weapon. She kicked it away and drove her palm into his chest, sending him crashing into her SUV. Then, flashing red and blue lights washed over the street, cutting through the chaos. But the relief she expected never came. Multiple police cruisers screeched to a halt, officers pouring out, weapons drawn. But they didn't go after the masked attackers. Instead, the 3 men melted into the shadows, slipping behind the dark sedan that sped off seconds later, tires screeching against asphalt. Lauren was left standing there, chest heaving, bruised and bloodied, as Captain David Morrow stepped out of one of the cruisers holding an envelope in his hand. His expression was calm, almost smug. "Agent Harris," he said, his voice echoing across the driveway. "You're hereby suspended from the FBI, effective immediately." For a moment, the world went silent. Lauren's stomach dropped, her fingers tightening at her sides as he handed her the envelope. Inside was an official letter from the Bureau itself, bearing her name and signature from her supervisor, citing pending investigation into conduct unbecoming of an agent. The words blurred before her eyes as anger boiled in her chest. "You're behind this," she said, her voice low, dangerous. Morrow's smirk widened slightly, as though he wanted her to say it out loud. "Me?" he asked, feigning innocence. "The Bureau made its decision. You've become a liability." Her jaw clenched so tight it ached, but she said nothing. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Around them, her neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, phones glowing faintly in the dark, recording bits of the chaos unfolding on her front lawn. Lauren's SUV door creaked as she leaned against it, her shoulder throbbing, blood trickling from the corner of her lip. Henry and Ethan's faces flashed in her mind, and the weight of everything threatened to crush her. But she stood taller instead, refusing to break in front of him. "You're making a mistake, Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the fire raging inside. "And when this is over, you'll answer for all of it." Morrow didn't respond, only nodded toward the other officers before climbing back into his cruiser. Within seconds, the street was silent again, broken only by the sound of Lauren's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the dark sedan disappearing into the night. She stumbled inside, locking the door behind her, and slid down against it, letting herself breathe for the first time in what felt like hours. The adrenaline faded, and the pain set in, a bruised shoulder, a cut lip, and deep, simmering rage. Whoever had sent those masked men knew her capabilities and wanted her silenced. And now, without her badge, they thought she was vulnerable. But they'd underestimated her. Lauren wasn't done, not by a long shot. She grabbed her phone, dialing Tamara Evans, the civil rights attorney she'd worked with before. Her voice was hoarse but steady when Tamara answered. "Tamara, it's happening," she said simply. "They're coming for me." Tamara's reply was immediate, sharp with concern. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. We fight this." Before she hung up, she checked her messages, dozens of texts from Nadia Khan, an investigative journalist and longtime ally. Flooded her inbox. "Lauren, videos are everywhere. The whole country is watching. This is bigger than Charlotte." Lauren closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the door. If they wanted war, they'd get one. She would expose every layer of corruption, every dirty dollar, every abuse of power, and she wouldn't stop until justice was restored, not just for her, but for every family like hers who had suffered in silence. Outside, distant thunder rumbled across Charlotte's skyline, carrying with it the weight of what was coming. She whispered into the quiet house, more a vow than a prayer. They picked the wrong mother. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Lauren's dining room had transformed into a full-scale war room, the quiet suburban space now drowning under piles of files, photographs, and digital evidence spread across every inch of the wooden table. A half-drained coffee mug sat precariously on a stack of reports, its dark ring staining the corner of a page labeled "Confidential, Internal Use Only." Outside, Charlotte's August night pressed against the windows, cicadas humming faintly in the distance, but inside, the atmosphere was razor-sharp, heavy with tension and purpose. Lauren stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding despite the bruises along her jaw and the fading cut on her lip, a reminder of the ambush outside her home just 48 hours earlier. Her sons, Henry and Ethan, were asleep upstairs, their small, uneven breaths filtering faintly through the air vents. Protecting them had always been her first priority. But tonight, Lauren was preparing for war. Seated across from her was Tamara Evans, a sharp-witted civil rights attorney with a reputation for dismantling corrupt systems, her dark blazer discarded and sleeves rolled up as she scribbled notes furiously on a legal pad. Beside her, Malcolm Reed, a community activist known for organizing Charlotte's largest protests, tapped at his laptop, pulling up names, addresses, and complaint histories. At the far end of the table sat Nadia Khan, an investigative journalist whose relentless pursuit of truth had exposed 3 major police scandals in the last 5 years. Her camera rested beside her notebook, the small red light blinking steadily as she recorded every moment for documentation. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of a movement. Lauren held up a printed spreadsheet, slamming it gently onto the table to refocus the room's energy. 29 brutality complaints, she said, her voice steady but cold. 29 victims since 2021, all buried. She tapped the page, her finger landing on the highlighted name of Officer James Tucker. And he's still out there, protected, promoted, and paid. Tamara glanced at the numbers, shaking her head in disbelief. Every single one of these claims was settled quietly, she murmured, scanning the columns. No internal reviews, no formal reprimands, just payouts. Over $2,000 funneled from the Charlotte Police Union to silence these families. Malcolm slammed his fist softly against the table, his voice breaking with frustration. This is systemic. This isn't just Tucker. It's the entire chain of command. He gestured toward another set of documents Lauren had laid out, linking the payouts to signatures from Captain David Morrow and other high-ranking officials. You take him down, Malcolm continued, his eyes locking with Lauren's. You take the whole rotten house down with him. Nadia leaned forward, flipping open a small binder filled with her preliminary findings. I've already confirmed at least 7 whistleblowers inside the department, she said, her voice quickening as adrenaline pushed her words out faster. And guess what? They all say the same thing. Complaints were intentionally buried, evidence deleted, and officers reassigned instead of disciplined. She pulled out a glossy photograph, sliding it across the table. And this, she added, is where it gets deeper. Lauren picked up the photo. A grainy surveillance still showing Tucker at a late-night diner with a man she recognized immediately, Martin Keene, the treasurer of the Charlotte Police Union. The timestamp read 2:43 a.m., dated just 2 nights before the Freedom Park confrontation. This isn't random, Lauren whispered, more to herself than the group. They knew who I was before they even approached me. Tamara's pen stilled mid-air, the thought settling heavy in the room. Lauren, she said carefully, are you saying this was targeted? Lauren met her gaze, her jaw tightening. I'm saying someone higher up knew my sons and I would be there that day. That couple at the park? They weren't just bystanders. They were bait. The realization sent a ripple of silence through the room, everyone pausing to let it sink in. Outside. A police siren wailed faintly in the distance, its rising and falling pitch somehow amplifying the gravity of the moment, breaking the silence. Nadia clicked her pen, her voice calm but laced with urgency. If we're right, then this isn't just harassment, it's entrapment, and if we prove that, this entire department burns. Lauren exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Then we prove it, she said simply. Every complaint, every settlement, every buried case, we drag it into the light where they can't control the narrative anymore. Malcolm nodded, already drafting a plan on his tablet. We organize a public forum, he suggested, his voice steady but energized. Not just a press conference, a televised community forum, victims, witnesses, families. We make them tell their stories directly, unfiltered. Tamara leaned back, nodding thoughtfully. If we put real faces to these numbers, the city can't ignore it anymore, and once it's out there, the DOJ will have no choice but to investigate. Lauren tapped her finger on the table, the rhythm deliberate, her mind racing through strategies. We'll need airtight evidence, she said. Financial records, memos, internal communications, something they can't dismiss as speculation. She glanced at Nadia. You've got contacts in the bureau. Think you can dig without tipping them off? Nadia smirked faintly, her eyes glinting with determination. I already started, she said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Internal FBI memos flagging you as unstable have been circulating since the park incident. Lauren's stomach sank as she plugged the drive into her laptop, the document flashing on screen. At the top of the page, underlined in bold, were the words, Potential security risk. Recommend suspension pending review. Her hands balled into fists at her sides, her voice a low, controlled growl. They're trying to dismantle me from the inside. Tamara reached out, resting a reassuring hand on her forearm. Then we go louder. Faster, and harder than they can bury you. Lauren nodded, pushing past the sting of betrayal, letting her anger sharpen her focus. If they want war, she said quietly, we'll give them one. The group worked late into the night, piecing together a timeline that stretched back nearly a decade. They uncovered dozens of bank transfers from the police union's slush fund to city officials, all labeled under vague entries like operational allowances and community outreach. In reality, the money had been used to silence victims, erase records, and protect officers like Tucker at any cost. As the clock crept past midnight, Lauren stepped away from the table, standing by the window as she stared out into the quiet street. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman carrying more weight than ever before. An FBI badge stripped, a reputation under siege, and two boys upstairs who depended on her for safety she could no longer guarantee. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself as memories of Michael, her late husband, surfaced, his easy smile, his promise to protect their family, the sudden loss that had left her raising their sons alone. Tonight, that promise burned inside her like a live wire. She turned back to the group, voice firm, energy renewed. We file formal complaints with the DOJ first thing tomorrow, she instructed. We secure the venue for the community forum, and we reach out to every victim we can find. No delays, no fear. If they want to silence me, they'll have to silence this entire city. Malcolm grinned faintly, typing rapidly. I'll mobilize the neighborhoods, he said. We'll fill that forum wall to wall. Nadia closed her notebook, sliding it into her bag. I'll draft the exposé, she said. By the time we go public, we'll control the narrative, not them. Tamara glanced up from her notes, her voice steady but soft. Lauren, once we start this, there's no going back. Lauren met her eyes, unwavering. I don't want to go back, she said simply. I want the truth out. Upstairs. Henry stirred in his sleep, whispering through the thin walls. Lauren caught fragments of his small, dreaming voice. Don't hurt my mom. Don't hurt her. Her chest tightened, but she channeled the ache into determination. They'd already come for her once. Next time, she would be ready, by the time they wrapped for the night. The team had mapped out every move, subpoenas, media outreach, encrypted backups of all evidence stored off-site. Lauren slid the final printed chart into a folder labeled Operation Freedom. She turned off the dining room light, but as she climbed the stairs toward her sleeping sons, she whispered under her breath, almost like a vow. For them, and for every name on that list, I won't stop until they pay. And as she lay awake hours later, staring at the ceiling, she knew one thing for certain. Captain David Morrow and Officer James Tucker thought they'd cornered her. But in reality, they had just lit the fuse. Because now, Lauren Harris wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for an entire city. The Charlotte Community Center buzzed with a tense energy that hung heavy in the air, the kind that made every breath feel weighted and every sound amplified. Every seat was filled, hundreds packed shoulder to shoulder inside the large auditorium, while dozens more lined the walls or stood outside beneath banners demanding justice. News cameras clustered at the back, their red recording lights blinking like watchful eyes. While microphones from every major network lined the stage, Lauren stood just beyond the curtain, her hands resting on the podium edge as she steadied her breathing, listening to the low roar of voices building into a collective heartbeat. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every victim silenced, every family intimidated, every name buried under the weight of police corruption. Tamara Evans leaned close, her voice low and steady, a grounding force amid the chaos. Stay calm, stay sharp. Let the evidence speak louder than their lies. Beside her, Malcolm Reed glanced at his phone, whispering updates about protesters outside. "We've got over 3,000 people live streaming already," he murmured, his voice tinged with awe. Nadia Khan, her camera strapped securely to her shoulder, adjusted the focus, ensuring every second would be captured. "The country's watching," she reminded them, her tone urgent but firm. Lauren nodded once, letting their voices fade into the background. She looked down at the thick folder in her hands, her entire case condensed into pages of damning truth. It had taken weeks of sleepless nights, encrypted communications, and hidden surveillance to gather it all. But it was finally here, proof of everything they'd tried to bury. Out on stage, Police Union President Edward Klein, a broad-shouldered man with a slicked-back haircut and expensive suit, gripped the podium like it was a weapon. His booming voice reverberated through the speakers. "Our officers put their lives on the line every day for this city," he declared, his tone dripping with authority. "The recent allegations against Officer Tucker and others are nothing more than social media hysteria fueled by misinformation. We stand by our officers." The crowd erupted into murmurs, some agreeing, most not. But Klein raised his hand, demanding silence. "And as for Dr. Lauren Harris," he continued, spitting her name like an accusation, "her actions at Freedom Park endangered her children, our officers, and the public. She is under federal investigation and should not be trusted." Lauren stepped forward then, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood stage as the crowd turned to face her. Murmurs surged instantly, some in support, some in disbelief. She walked to the podium with steady poise, laying her folder flat in front of her. "That," she began, her voice carrying clear and strong through the microphone, "is a lie." A hush rippled through the room. Her gaze swept across the audience, locking briefly with every camera. "I am Dr. Lauren Harris, Special Agent FBI, and I am here because the people of this city deserve the truth." She opened the folder and held up a page high for the cameras. "Officer James Tucker has 29 brutality complaints filed against him since 2021, she said, her voice unwavering. 29 families paid to stay silent, over $2,000 in union funds funneled into hush money. She let the weight of her words hang in the silence before placing the documents on the podium for the cameras to zoom in on. The crowd erupted, phones flashing and hands shooting up as chants broke out. "Justice now! Justice now!" Klein's face flushed deep red, his composure slipping. "Those are unverified claims," he barked into his microphone, struggling to be heard over the swelling voices. "Anyone can fake paperwork." Lauren ignored him, spreading several more documents across the podium. Bank transfers, internal memos, signed settlements, whistleblower statements, all pointing directly to years of systemic corruption. "These aren't claims," she said sharply, her voice slicing through the noise. "This is evidence, evidence your union tried to destroy." Just then, a commotion erupted near the side entrance. A group of men in tactical gear forced their way inside, their black uniforms unmarked, their movements precise and aggressive. Lauren recognized them instantly, the same masked men from the ambush outside her home. Adrenaline surged as her instincts screamed danger. The first attacker lunged toward the stage, knocking over 2 rows of chairs as terrified screams filled the air. The audience scrambled, chaos rippling through the room. "Stay behind me!" Lauren shouted to Tamara and Nadia as she dropped the microphone and pivoted to face them head-on. The first man swung a baton toward her ribs, but she blocked it with her forearm, grabbing his wrist and twisting until the weapon clattered to the ground. The second came from her left, aiming low, but she ducked and swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing into the stage steps. The third grabbed her from behind, his arm locking around her throat, but she slammed her heel backward into his shin, breaking free and spinning sharply to land an elbow against his jaw. He staggered, dropping to one knee. Phones from every angle captured the confrontation, live streaming it to thousands watching across the country. "Keep filming," Nadia yelled from behind the camera, ducking as one of the attackers lunged past her. The crowd roared, some chanting Lauren's name, others screaming for security. Finally, armed community volunteers stationed at the exits rushed forward, tackling the intruders and forcing them to the ground. Police officers at the back, hesitant, conflicted, hung back at first but moved in once they realized they were being filmed from every angle. Within seconds, the men were restrained, masks ripped off to reveal their faces. Gasps spread like wildfire through the audience when two of the attackers were identified. Not anonymous mercenaries, but off-duty officers from Captain Morrow's own division. Lauren picked up the microphone again, breathing hard but steady, her voice raw and unshaken. "This," she said, pointing toward the restrained men, "is how far they will go to silence the truth. But we are not afraid anymore." Her words sent a tremor through the crowd, chants swelling louder than before. "Lauren! Lauren! Lauren!" Edward Klein slipped out the side door, avoiding cameras. But it was too late. Nadia's live feed had already captured his face moments earlier, alongside every piece of evidence Lauren had revealed. Tamara stepped forward, resting a hand on Lauren's shoulder, whispering so only she could hear. "They know it's over." But Lauren shook her head slightly, scanning the room, her sharp eyes locking on every lens, every witness, every voice now aligned with hers. "No," she replied softly but firmly. "This is just the beginning." Journalists crowded the front row, shouting questions as the energy reached a fever pitch. "Agent Harris, are you accusing the entire department? Do you have proof tying this to Captain Morrow? Will you press federal charges?" Lauren raised her hand for silence and leaned into the microphone, her voice calm, collected, deliberate. "We're not here to tear down law enforcement," she said, her words measured yet powerful. "We're here to rebuild it, to demand accountability, transparency, and justice. We will not rest until every name, every victim, and every dollar stolen from this city sees the light of day." Behind her, Malcolm Reed turned his phone around to show her the live view count. Over 1.8 million viewers and climbing by the second. Comments poured in from across the country, flooding the screen with support. "We stand with Lauren! Justice for Charlotte! Expose them all!" Lauren's chest tightened, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just Charlotte anymore. This was national. The DOJ, the FBI, every major news network. They couldn't ignore her now. As the cameras zoomed in one last time, Lauren stood tall at the podium, her bruised face illuminated by harsh stage lights, her badge clipped firmly back onto her blazer. "To every mother raising black sons," she said, her voice resonating with emotion. "To every family who's been silenced, and to every child who's ever felt unsafe in the presence of those sworn to protect them. This is for you." The crowd rose to its feet, applause and chants blending into one unbroken roar. Outside, the streets of Charlotte filled with supporters holding candles, signs, and cameras, their voices echoing into the humid night air. Inside the community center, surrounded by allies, evidence, and undeniable truth. Lauren Harris knew the tide had turned, but deep down, she also knew this victory came at a cost, and the fight was far from over, because tonight, she hadn't just exposed corruption, she had declared war on an entire system, and this time, the entire country was watching. Morning came with a storm of headlines, and Charlotte woke up to chaos. Every major news outlet led with the same story. FBI agent exposes Charlotte police corruption live, DOJ launches investigation. Lauren Harris's name was everywhere, splashed across television screens, trending on social media, dominating radio broadcasts, and sparking debates on national talk shows. As the sun rose over her quiet Myers Park neighborhood, the peaceful street outside her home was unrecognizable. News vans lined the sidewalks, reporters clustered under umbrellas despite the sticky August heat. microphones and cameras pointed at her front door. Lauren stood inside, watching the scene unfold through a narrow slit in the curtains, her coffee untouched and growing cold on the kitchen counter. Upstairs. Henry and Ethan were still asleep, but she knew they wouldn't be shielded from this for long. Her phone vibrated non-stop on the counter, buzzing with notifications from journalists, FBI colleagues, civil rights groups, and total strangers. She ignored them all until Tamara Evans called. "Lauren!" The attorney's voice came sharp and fast. "It's happening. The DOJ just announced a federal investigation into the Charlotte Police Department. Tucker, Morrow, Klein. Everyone's under review. We've got momentum, but you need to be careful. They're not going down quietly." Lauren exhaled slowly. Tension coiled tight in her chest. "I expected this," she said, her voice steady but low. "But the threats are going to escalate. They tried to ambush me once. Tamara, they'll try again." Tamara hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'll double security. We'll move you and the boys somewhere safe if it comes to that." Meanwhile, Nadia Khan's expose had gone viral overnight, her live stream from the community forum, where Lauren revealed the 29 brutality complaints, the hush money payouts, and the off-duty officers behind the staged attack, hit 2.7 million views in less than 12 hours. Major outlets picked up the footage, and hashtags like hashtag Justice for Charlotte and hashtag Lauren the Protector surged across the country. Malcolm Reed called mid-morning, his voice tight but triumphant. "Lauren, they're organizing rallies in 5 cities. Atlanta, Raleigh, D.C., even Chicago. The whole country's watching you." But with the wave of support came a darker undercurrent. The police union's official statement accused Lauren of staging the entire incident for personal and political gain, calling her a disgraced agent under investigation for reckless misconduct. Local talk radio exploded with callers divided sharply along racial and political lines, some calling her a hero, others demanding her resignation. By noon, the mayor of Charlotte held a press conference, visibly rattled as flashing cameras lit up her pale, tense face. "The events surrounding Agent Harris's confrontation at Freedom Park," she said carefully, "and the evidence revealed at last night's forum are deeply concerning. The city fully supports the Department of Justice's investigation. Effective immediately. Captain David Morrow has been placed on administrative leave." The announcement sent shockwaves through the department. But Lauren didn't celebrate. She knew Morrow wasn't the type to retreat quietly. Just after the press conference, her phone buzzed again, this time with a private message from an unknown number. "You should have kept quiet. This ends soon." She stared at the screen, expression unreadable, before forwarding it immediately to Tamara and Nadia for documentation. "They're watching," she said flatly. That evening, the boys came downstairs, their faces pale but determined. Henry, clutching his camera, asked softly, "Mom, are we in danger?" Lauren knelt in front of him, resting a steadying hand on his shoulder. "We're safe," she said firmly, though the words carried more hope than certainty. "But we have to stay strong, together." Ethan hugged her waist, whispering into her shirt, "I don't like the police anymore." Her chest tightened, the ache of their stolen innocence carving deep into her resolve. By nightfall, the city's skyline glimmered under scattered lightning as storm clouds rolled in, mirroring the turbulence mounting beneath Charlotte's surface. The community center live stream drew hundreds back into the streets outside Lauren's home, holding candles and signs calling for justice. Their chants carried through the humid air. "Lauren! Lauren! We stand with Lauren!" Inside, Tamara arrived flanked by 2 private security agents, both former military. She moved quickly, setting up motion detectors by the doors and reinforcing the locks. "They've got people following you," she warned quietly. I traced 2 vehicles circling the neighborhood this afternoon. Lauren nodded, unsurprised. They're desperate, she said. Desperate people make reckless moves. Later, Malcolm and Nadia arrived with updates from their networks. Nadia pulled out her tablet, showing Lauren a series of leaked memos from inside the Charlotte Police Union, marked confidential. The documents revealed a secretive internal fund labeled Operation Containment, allocating over $5,000 for public relations management and witness mitigation. Lauren's stomach turned as she scrolled further, uncovering direct payments linked to officers involved in suppressing complaints and intimidating victims. This, Nadia said softly, is going to blow the investigation wide open. But the more they uncovered, the more dangerous things became. At 9:47 p.m., just as Malcolm finished briefing the team, Lauren's security cameras pinged an alert. 3 figures in dark hoodies at the edge of her driveway. The monitors showed them lingering, one holding a phone up toward the house, recording. Lauren signaled silently to the agent stationed by the door. They moved swiftly, stepping outside with weapons drawn, their presence alone enough to send the figures scattering into the shadows. They're probing for weakness, Tamara muttered as the doors locked again. Testing boundaries. Lauren's gaze hardened. Then we give them none. The next morning, the fallout reached fever pitch. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all carried live segments dissecting every frame of the community forum footage. Former DOJ officials debated openly on air whether the Charlotte Police Department should be placed under federal oversight. Hashtags trended worldwide, drawing attention from human rights groups and civil liberties organizations. Even the FBI, silent until now, released a brief statement confirming that Lauren's suspension was being reviewed internally pending new evidence. Meanwhile, Captain David Morrow vanished from public view. Rumors swirled of emergency meetings inside the department, officers shredding files late into the night, and Tucker deleting his social media accounts after online outrage exploded. But it wasn't just institutional panic. Personal attacks escalated too. Lauren's emails were flooded with threats. A deepfake video surfaced online falsely depicting her assaulting a teenager, quickly debunked but shared thousands of times before takedown. Through it all, Lauren stood resolute. She refused interviews, refused distractions, and doubled down on the investigation. Every morning started the same, poring over files in her dining room war room, Henry beside her editing photos he'd taken at rallies, Ethan curled in the corner playing with his soccer ball, the hum of printers and whispered strategy filling the house like the steady beat of a drum line. One evening, as lightning split the sky and rain hammered against the windows, Nadia burst into the room with breaking news. The DOJ just issued warrants. The names rolled off her tongue like falling dominoes. James Tucker, Kevin Walsh, Martin Keene, Edward Klein. Arrests were imminent. Tamara grinned for the first time in days, her exhaustion showing but her eyes bright with relief. "It's starting," she whispered, almost to herself. "It's finally starting." Lauren sat back slowly, closing her eyes as thunder rumbled outside. It wasn't over. She knew that. But for the first time in weeks, the tide was shifting. Henry climbed onto the chair beside her, resting his small hand over hers. "Does this mean we won, Mom?" he asked quietly. Lauren turned, brushing his curls back gently, her voice soft but firm. "It means we're winning," she said. "But we have to keep fighting until it's finished." As the house fell into a rare silence, she stared at the evidence sprawled across the table, at the faces of victims printed on page after page, and at her sleeping son, Ethan, curled on the couch under a blanket. The stakes weren't just professional anymore. They were personal, carved into the very core of who she was as a mother, as an agent, as a black woman fighting a system that had tried to break her family. She whispered into the quiet, her voice almost lost under the sound of rain. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone they tried to silence. And as the storm raged over Charlotte that night, Lauren Harris prepared for the final battle, the one that would decide not only her future but the future of an entire city. Freedom Park looked different now. The August air was warm, the lake shimmered softly under the morning sun, and the voices carried not fear, but laughter. Less than a month ago, this same park had been the epicenter of chaos, the place where Lauren Harris had been humiliated, assaulted, and nearly broken in front of her sons. Today, it stood transformed, a symbol of resilience, justice, and change. Hundreds of people gathered across the green lawns, families holding signs, children waving small flags that read, "Accountability wins," while journalists lined the pathways, cameras ready. In the middle of it all stood Lauren, Henry gripping her hand tightly, Ethan holding his soccer ball against his chest. For the first time in weeks, her heart felt light, just a week earlier. The Department of Justice had completed its investigation, its findings broadcast live on every major network. The report was damning. Captain David Morrow had been arrested on charges of obstruction of justice and conspiracy. Officer James Tucker, once shielded by his badge, now faced multiple counts of aggravated assault, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. Edward Klein, the police union president, had resigned in disgrace after leaked emails revealed his direct involvement in funneling hush money to victims' families. Nearly 47 officers were implicated in misconduct dating back over a decade. For too long. Their abuses had been buried, their victims silenced. Now, every name had been read aloud, every voice amplified, every secret laid bare for the world to see. Lauren stood at the podium erected near the park's fountain, her gold FBI badge pinned back to her blazer for the first time since the suspension. It gleamed beneath the sunlight. But this time, it wasn't just a symbol of authority, it was a promise fulfilled. Reporters hushed, microphones leaned forward, and the crowd fell silent as she began to speak. "A month ago," she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion, "I brought my sons here to play soccer. We came to laugh, to live, to breathe. But what should have been a peaceful afternoon became a nightmare, because of bias, because of abuse of power, and because of a system designed to protect itself instead of the people it serves." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on Henry and Ethan, whose wide eyes brimmed with pride. "I fought back," she continued, "not just for my family, but for every family who has ever been silenced, every parent who has ever feared for their child's safety, and every voice buried under the weight of corruption." The audience erupted in applause, but Lauren raised a hand gently, signaling for quiet. "Justice isn't a destination," she said firmly. "It's a commitment to hold every system accountable, no matter how powerful, a commitment to stand together, even when standing feels impossible." Malcolm Reed stepped up beside her, holding a petition signed by over 15,000 residents, demanding federal oversight of the Charlotte Police Department. "We're making history," he whispered as he handed it over, and Lauren nodded, tears pooling but unspilled. Tamara Evans stood nearby, her chin lifted, her expression fierce and proud, while Nadia Khan's camera streamed the event to hundreds of thousands watching online. The DOJ's reforms had already begun. A new independent civilian review board was established. Every officer implicated was suspended pending trial, and the police union's power to bury complaints was stripped entirely. Victims' families, once pressured into silence, now received official apologies and restitution funds. For the first time in years, Charlotte's black communities felt hope blooming where anger had once taken root. But for Lauren, this wasn't just systemic, it was deeply personal. When the speeches ended, she knelt in the grass beside Henry and Ethan, pulling them into her arms as the crowd chanted her name. Henry rested his head against her shoulder, whispering, "You kept us safe. Mom." Ethan's small hand clutched her badge, his voice soft as he said, "I'm proud of you." She held them tighter, her heart swelling with gratitude and pain all at once. "No," she whispered back, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm proud of us." As the afternoon faded, supporters lit candles across the park, their soft glow reflecting on the lake where ducks drifted lazily under the orange-tinted sky. Freedom Park, once a place marked by trauma, had become a sanctuary of healing and solidarity. Before leaving, Lauren walked slowly to the exact spot where the confrontation with Tucker began weeks earlier. She stood there silently, the memory sharp in her mind, the raised voices, Henry's trembling hand, Ethan's frightened cries. But this time, she didn't feel anger. She felt strength. Nadia approached, her camera lowered for once, her voice gentle. "How does it feel, Lauren, being back here?" Lauren smiled faintly, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "Like reclaiming something they tried to take from us," she said softly. "This isn't their story anymore. It's ours." The live stream captured her words, and within hours, they trended nationwide under the hashtag Reclaiming Freedom. Messages of support poured in from across the globe, people sharing their own stories, their own battles, their own victories. What started as one woman's fight had become a movement, and Lauren had become its reluctant symbol, a mother, an agent, and now, a catalyst for change. As the last of the crowd drifted away and the sun dipped below the horizon, Lauren took one final look at Freedom Park, the voices of her sons playing nearby, mixing with the hum of cicadas in the warm August air. Her life had changed forever. Her city had changed forever, and the ripple effects were only beginning. She reached down, taking Henry's hand in one and Ethan's in the other, their small fingers curling tightly around hers. "Let's go home," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had endured and everything they had built together. For the first time in a long time, she believed those words, and as they walked toward the car under a sky littered with stars. Lauren knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger than herself, a promise to fight for every family, every child, every life touched by injustice. Because sometimes, the greatest victories don't happen in courtrooms or press conferences. Sometimes, they happen right where the fight began, at Freedom Park. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from to support us.